There we go, and the countdown's ended, which means it is time for another Raw Sport Quaran-Stream. I am your host and Raw's head of sport, Josh Sim. Welcome back for another Saturday filled with football action. Obviously, the international break is now over. Club competition has resumed, and thank you, Enoch. Yes, we are one of the. Well, I mean, I don't want to brag, but we are up there with some of the best content from the radio station. Coming up, so we're going to talk a bit about the international break. Obviously, England shock horror after a great result, followed it up with a disappointing result. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a few of the other noteworthy results. And Italy played Holland, and my guest will, I'm sure, have a few things to say on that. As will I on Germany's 3-3 draw with Switzerland. There's plenty of talking points on that one. Before we will dive into the Merseyside derby that just took place, as well as previewing the rest of this week's action. I know Chelsea have just kicked off against Southampton, so if there are any goal alerts from there, we will let you know. And then finally, we will look ahead at the Champions League matchday 1 and the fixtures. I know we obviously last week we went through the groups and in more detail on how the draws turned out, but now we can actually look at individual games and individual matchups, which should be fun. And then if we have time, we will do a bit of a state of the continent and have a look at all the different leagues, namely the big five, other big five leagues going on at the moment. So without further ado, today it is a bit more of an intimate affair, this one, because it is just myself and Joe Spagnoli who joins us as always. So here he is. Hey, Joe.
Good afternoon. Yeah, it's interesting circumstances at the moment, Josh, because I have to be somewhat quiet because my dad's currently sleeping upstairs. But it's difficult to remain quiet when, for some reason, at half-time, Napoli are 4 goals up against Atalanta at the Stadio San Paolo. I'm sure we'll be talking about that later on because that makes absolutely no sense. But yeah, looking forward to talking football for 2 entire hours, just the two of us.
Hey, you and I can go the distance. Okay, this is for those who don't know. This is basically our private messages now out there,
more or less.
Much. Yeah, this is exactly this is our private chats now out there for YouTube and all to see. Just a quick reminder to everyone. I'll plug it later. We have an interview next week. For Black History Month, and so I will reveal details in a bit. And that means, as a bit of a heads up, Raw Sport Weekly, as we normally do on a every now and then on a Wednesday every fortnight, will not be taking place next Wednesday. There may be something else coming up in its place. We subject to availability, subject to interest. So we will see on that. And as for the interview, I'll let you guys know in a bit. But anyway, the international break, that finished. It is a fair reaction, Joe. It is kind of like it came and went, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've always really been, I don't get the whole, I don't like international break, just want club football to be back. I've always been a fan of them. But the problem is that, and even though I also really like the Nations League as an idea, like a Lega Nazionale is something that I always do on like FIFA or PES, whatever, every single year. But especially in these circumstances at the moment, ahead of European Championships that may not happen next year, competitions like the Copa America and anything to do with CONCACAF and the African Cup of Nations potentially delayed. It just seems really silly at the moment to have so much travelling in football, with COVID cases again on the rise, namely Cristiano Ronaldo as well testing positive, the second greatest player in the world. But yeah, the international break has come and went. There were some good results, some interesting ones, as well as some games where absolutely nothing happened because it's an international break.
Yeah, and one of those games, I mean, actually, it's been a week since we were last on there, so we have 2 England games we can kind of look back on. We did preview England Belgium, and surprise, surprise, we were all proven wrong. And England came away.
Actually,
they came away with that 2-1 win thanks to that deflected Mason Mount winner, Gareth Southgate's favourite child. And then followed that up with a 1-0 defeat at home to Denmark, in which Harry Maguire had a very torrid half hour, one could definitely say. I mean, Joe, international breaks, obviously, it's very hard to kind of make your mind up about a team on the back of those 2 games. But which game, I guess, do you think is more reflective of England? The 2-1 win over Belgium or the 1-0 defeat against Denmark, would you say?
I think what you're slightly implying in your question, judging from your tone, is that neither of them are particularly reliable, considering either the results or the overall quality of the England team at the moment. Mistakes abounded, I think, for Belgium in the first game, hence the deflected goal, which Mason Mount, as I can say, Gareth Southgate's protege, scored as well. And also, of course, the Harry Maguire mistakes, which we will definitely be going into, making 2 yellow cards in just over half an hour, and then 2 very quick mistakes, which led to the second yellow card in the game against Denmark. So honestly, this Nations League, it's been absolutely impossible to get a true sense of how good this England team is, even though the group is actually pretty heterogeneous in terms of the strength of competition. Going into these fixtures, you would absolutely have expected England to beat Denmark pretty convincingly, but probably face an awful lot of pressure against a very rotated Belgium side. In the end, these results ended up surprising most of us. But yeah, there are definitely some concerns on the England front, and the fact that Gareth Southgate is, I think, for the first time in quite some time, facing an awful lot of criticism from England fans about his squad selections, and especially in the defensive area, I think rightfully so.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't feel too long ago where, waistcoats soared in popularity, and Gareth Southgate was kind of the name on everyone's lips. But now, it does appear as though people are starting to change their minds, and obviously the displays don't help. But a lot of people focus on the team selection. Obviously, as I sort of alluded to, Mason Mount has been picked quite often by Southgate, much to some fans' chagrin, who believe Jack Grealish should be in there instead. And obviously, there's also been debates about his choice of central midfield pairing. He's obviously gone for, at times, he's picked Calvin Phillips twice. He's picked Jordan Henderson and Declan Rice, one or the other, to kind of supplement Phillips, and it's been accused of being non-imaginative or safe, maybe. And as well as the defense, where obviously there was no specialist left back. They picked a lot of right backs to play on the left, on the right, in centre back, wherever they could. So, of the 3 that I outlined there, the midfield question mark, the Mount Grealish debate, and the right backs all over the place, what stands out to you as the biggest one that needs to be fixed?
I mean, in terms of raw personnel, the left-back problem is one that's going to continue to be an issue for England, I think, for some time. Ben Chilwell, obviously not featuring in these games, he doesn't really fit that well, dare I say, into a 3-at-the-back formation, which Gareth Southgate deployed somewhat surprisingly, actually, over the course of these 2 games. I was not impressed, as you've kind of alluded to, by Ainsley Maitland-Niles playing at left-back against Denmark. He did not have a good game whatsoever. And then in the game against Belgium, you could say the same about Kieran Trippier, who's obviously had some off-the-field controversies recently as well. The issues, looking into midfield and the Mason Mount, Jack Grealish debate, which I don't think people were expecting to be as much of a flashpoint as it has been, that's going to be like a squad selection problem. But the bigger issue by far is the true absence of left-backs that can play in that system. Obviously, Ben Chilwell is a favourite for that starting berth at England. But, we were talking about England as having a decent amount of left-back depth about a year or so ago. Brandon Williams doesn't seem to be part of the discussion anymore. Luke Shaw does not seem to be a part of the discussion anymore. Danny Rose has completely disappeared. Let's not even talk about what's happened to Kieran Gibbs. It feels like in a position which, granted, isn't crucial for a national team to be great, England have lost an awful lot of their depth very, very quickly. And the same goes for centre-back, as, again, I'm sure we'll get into in a few minutes.
Yeah, we've seen this before, right? We've seen England players have not one game that everything seems to go against them, and then obviously they're in the headlines for the next week or so. So this isn't new, but it does. For Harry Maguire, it just appears like everything that could have not gone wrong, but everything that certainly could have been avoided has kind of just happened. Like you talk about, obviously, the Greek criminal court case, which I believe it's still ongoing. It's not exactly come to its full resolution yet. You talk about, obviously, Man United's poor start doesn't help either. Is there a case for just, taking him out of the firing line, just kind of giving him a break, a bit of a just because Man United, I mean, obviously, I know you don't like the Europa League excuse, but obviously they continued playing until August and then had maybe 2 or 3 weeks to kind of get themselves rested and then back to full fitness in time for the Premier League start. So is there a case for just, Maguire just needing a break from all this?
I mean, the same was true of AS Roma, and none of us are making that excuse, so I'm still going to cling to my usual argument. I think in the case of Harry Maguire, what happened in Greece is definitely playing on his mind. There's clearly an awful lot going on with him at the moment, outside of his on-field performances, which is compromising those. But I feel like the opportunity to take him out of the firing line was the international break. England has, supposedly so many good centre-backs. You see Michael Keane really coming into form for Everton at the beginning of this season, after actually being very disappointing for England in the last 12 months or so. Think about his absolute shocker against the Czech Republic, the first time England had lost a qualifier for a major competition in about 10 years. People forgot about that result very quickly. But again, I feel like Keane should get a chance here. Even though they're not getting an awful lot of game time anymore, Fikayo Tomori's available. Connor Cody, of course, who's made some really good appearances for England recently, was available. In light of Harry Maguire's poor start, it wouldn't be out of the question just to give him a bit of a rest, considering that this season is, on the international front and on the club front, going to be more condensed than usual. So, Southgate could have taken him out of the firing line. He chose not to. And the end result was, against Denmark, a 1 out of 10 performance, which completely compromised the team from minute one. Just an absolutely shambolic display from Harry Maguire. And it's just unforgivable for a player that cost £80 million from Leicester City. We'll talk about Harry Maguire in a minute, because I've been having a debate with some friends about this, which is quite interesting. And also I need to name and shame a couple of people from Raw Sport last year. But just a really, really odd situation, and not made all the worse by Rio Ferdinand, Manchester United legend, now calling for him to be stripped of the Manchester United captaincy, which in fairness was kind of flung on him in the first place. So it's been a turbulent 12 months for Harry Maguire, not just a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, some of it, I mean, to be fair, certainly the price tag of his transfer fee, that obviously players are definitely not in control of that. So, I mean, some of it obviously, is unwarranted, but it does feel as though it looked like he was carrying the weight of his shoulders when he kind of trudged off the Wembley pitch. It did feel like a lot of things, like you said, external things had kind of been weighing on him. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. And as for England, we will wait and see. Again, it was a bit of I think overall, I'm sure you agree, it was a bit of a mixed week. We'll see, I guess, I believe we have an international break in November. So I guess that'll be the next opportunity we see them play. And we'll kind of weigh up from there how it's gone. Ben Parkinson, who joined us last week, it does kind of highlight how the lack of leadership at the time at Manchester United in the dressing room, so that he ended up with the armband. Because when you look around at that team, there's not many. I mean, is there any? Obviously, does it stand out to you? I mean, I guess the closest one for me would be Marcus Rashford.
I mean, Marcus Rashford's been a leader in an awful lot of ways this year. I'm quite regretful of the fact that last week we didn't give Marcus Rashford a quick shout out for his OBE, which is incredibly well deserved. Yeah. I wouldn't say he necessarily does, he's right for the United captaincy right now. Ben will have more insight into this than me. There really is kind of similar to Chelsea. There is a real shortage of true leadership and true captaincy material at Manchester United. I mean, even Ashley Young, when he left for Internazionale, wasn't regarded as a particularly amazing captain for Manchester United, barely even a starting player. So even if you could even consider him a starting player when he left. So no, it shouldn't have been flung on Harry Maguire. I don't think he's got a special leadership quality anyway. It's very recently that he's been considered as the best England centre-back on account of the massive regression we've seen from John Stones and Kyle Walker being dropped off the cliff, although he's never really a centre-back anyway. But no, what I wanted to talk about with this, actually, is that I was having a debate with some friends. A year or so ago, I went on a show on Raw Sport. You weren't there, Josh. And Kylan Stillwood, our former head of sport, was asking me about the quality of the Italy team at that exact moment. And to point out how strong I believe the Italy team was, I decided to do just quickly in the studio a combined 11 for Italy and England. And when I selected Armando Izzo and Alessio Romagnoli at centre-back, Jack Butler, former head of Raw Sport, called me absolutely insane for picking any Italian centre-back over Harry Maguire. These comments have aged like milk, I think it's fair to say. I can now name, I reckon, 8 or 9 Italian centre-backs I would happily take over Harry Maguire on paper, let alone on form. I asked some England fans the other day, though, and even they could name 4 or 5 English centre-backs that they would start over Harry Maguire. So this is what I've been saying for the last few years, that when England find a good centre-back, they regress very, very quickly, or at the very least, they go into a ridiculously bad run of form. It's happened yet again. It happened to John Stones a couple of years ago. It happened to Phil Jones before then. Even James Tarkowski, you could argue, not that he was very much in the team. Michael Keane, it happened to, and now it's happened to Harry Maguire as well. How many centre-backs do England need to go through before they can find one stable centre-back, let alone a pairing or back three?
Yeah, it reminds me of, and we'll obviously there were a few transfers that took place, and we'll mention them, but it does feel like the goalkeeping situation for England, because obviously Joe Hart was thought to be the starter for a long time, and that obviously didn't pan out. And then the likes of Jack Butland went a team, and then now they've Jack Butland we'll mention later when we talk about Crystal Palace, but he's obviously moved there now to kind of revitalize his career. There were just a lot of it does. And then now, we'll also want to talk about Jordan Pickford, but he also was, after the World Cup, thought to be the number one clear starting choice, and since has not really recaptured his form there. So it does feel as though in certain positions there are deficiencies for sure, and it'll be very interesting to see. Obviously, in terms of other areas, there's obviously huge strengths as well. You talk about the strikers, and we will talk about Calvert-Lewin in just a bit. But certainly, but even so, Danny Ings also scored during this international break. There's certainly plenty of options there as well. So yeah, as it is with England, we'll wait and see. Just a quick update. Timo Werner had a goal disallowed for Chelsea, so it was thought to be 1-0. Oh, it has been allowed. He has scored after all. So there was a goal disallowed, and then he has scored. He has. It looks like Ben Chilwell played in a forward pass, and he was able to get past his marker and then kind of score a low finish. So 1-0 Chelsea. Against Southampton. We'll do quick updates across the continent as we've got a bit more time today.
Yeah, I've got one.
I'll just run through the Bundesliga and I'll give you Serie A. But Leipzig have gone 1-0 up at Augsburg. Angelino scored on the stroke of half time. VfB Stuttgart are 1-0 up at Hertha Berlin. Kempf with the goal. As are Bayern Leverkusen, who are 1-0 up away at Mainz. Lucas Alario has scored, which is good for my Bundesliga fantasy team. Freiburg, Werder Bremen is 1-1. Fully Krug scored a penalty, cancelling out Philipp Leinhardt's opener. And Hoffenheim have held Borussia Dortmund to a goalless draw at the moment. That is a very fun game that I will definitely be watching the highlights of afterwards. Italy, there is one big game, and it is a lot more lopsided than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's about to get an awful lot more lopsided. Or at the very least, Atalanta, Gianpiero Gasperini. Very unusual to see a Gasperini team completely give up going into the second half, but 4 goals away from home in Campania, down against Napoli. I think it makes sense, but it is just so weird to see how park the bus their substitutions have gone, Josh. Starting centre-back Jose Luis Palomino taken off in favour of Johan Mojica, another defender. That's fairly bad, but it gets worse. They've taken off Papu Gomez, who I'd argue was Serie A MVP last year. They took him off in the 55th minute for Sam Lammers, striker, which isn't actually an offensive change when you consider how much more effective Gomez is as an attacker in the number 10 position than a youngster like Lammers is in the number 9. But the real shock is that the Colombian striker Duvan Zapata has been taken off in favour of the centre-back Berat Jimshiti. So that's more or less 4 centre-backs, 2 wing-backs, 2 deep midfielders, and nothing in front of it. This just does not feel right to watch Atalanta. This isn't even parking the bus. This is burying the bus in their Bergamasco ground. It's such a sad turn of events. Atalanta are going to do fine this year, but this game is... I'm really glad I'm not watching this live because this would be a car crash.
I think someone could just make a meme out of my facial reactions in the last 30 seconds. I've just gone from like very confused to kind of inquisitive to still confused. So interesting ones there. Obviously, in Spain, Atletico Madrid have taken the lead against Celta Vigo. Luis Suarez has scored for them. And earlier, Granada defeated Sevilla. And Sevilla, who will play Chelsea in a couple of days, we'll talk about them as well. They lost to Granada thanks to Yangel Herrera's header.
Good player.
Yeah, I mean, we going across. I mean, we had a little brief score update, but going back to international break, obviously, for Italy, he drew a goalless draw against Poland on Sunday night. That was followed by a 1-1 draw at home to the Netherlands. So no wins, but any positive takeaways to take from their performances? Do you think?
Very similar to the situation with England at the moment with COVID pressures, and also the Nations League being sort of inconsistently committed to by the nations. It's very difficult to extrapolate anything from these games. What it proves, though, is that the concerns up front for Italy in the striker position are still very much there. Ciro Immobile, unquestionably top 3 strikers in Europe last year in the league. Still not an effective striker on the international stage. In terms of who the second choice is, Andrea Belotti's far from his best. Chicho Caputo's done well, but again, are you going to rely on a player that's that much older, that much more system driven? Yeah, he had a great game against Moldova, but I'm sorry, that doesn't really mean an awful lot, relatively speaking. Tyrone Mings had an amazing game against Bulgaria. Does that mean he should be starting over Harry Maguire? At the moment, maybe, but still. But yeah, I mean, I didn't see enough of these games to really get a bead on how well Italy were doing. But it seems very similar, actually, to the Nations League game against Poland in the last campaign that was very, very negative. But then the game against the Netherlands started off so well. The pass into Lorenzo Pellegrini, who was playing out on the left, Roma captain Lorenzo Pellegrini, playing out of position on the left wing, but a fantastic goal from him, and even better assist, just completely splitting the Netherlands defensive line, which is very unusual considering they have 2 of the best centre-backs in the world, Stefan de Vrij and Virgil van Dijk at the back. Pellegrini went in, no chance for save whatsoever. But then, yeah, Donny van der Beek equalising. He's been an absolute menace for Italy in the last couple of months, injuring my favourite player, Nicolo Zaniolo, and now getting the equalising goal to take 2 points away from the Azzurri. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably one positive for Manchester United to take from the international break, is that the player they probably didn't need to sign over the summer, Donny van der Beek, is in really good form, and there may well be an argument for him to break into the United first 11.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting Van Beek to become public enemy number 70 for you, but there we go.
Oh, excuse me, there's far more than 70 on the Joe Spagnoli football.
I can imagine, and that is a completely different show, which we don't have time for today. Yeah, Italy had some interesting results. Some people may know, I've kind of followed German football closely, and so Germany, they beat Ukraine 2-1 in a very unconvincing display, I would say. And then they drew 3-0 at Switzerland. And for those who don't know, I obviously have my family live in Switzerland. So again, very interested in that game. And I think the one big takeaway for that one is Germany's defense needs sorting out quick, because they look very vulnerable on the break. The midfield for some reason doesn't quite fit. The Kimmich-Goretzka-Kroos combination does not quite, for some reason, come off quite well. And then there's some worrying times. Obviously, Joachim Low is definitely trying to figure it out, because he played with a back 3 on Sunday, then he tried to play on Saturday rather than he played a back 4 on the Wednesday. So he's obviously trying to figure it out. But yeah, bit of worrying times for Germany. I wouldn't say they're not quite the world beating team at the moment that many would assume. I mean, we talk about Bayern Munich being the favorites of the Champions League. Germany are not. I would not consider them favorites to win an international tournament if there was one to begin tomorrow, for instance. So other results. I mean, France had a pretty decent showing. They beat Croatia 2-1 on Wednesday, and then beforehand they had a goalless draw against Portugal, who are probably their biggest competitors in that Nations League group. Portugal, who also beats Sweden, I believe, 3-0. Yep. And then Spain lost to Ukraine 1-0, which is after beating Switzerland 1-0, which was an interesting one. I don't know. Did any other games stand out to you, Joe, across the international break, just in general, or?
I mean, I did have one point to make about the Germany team and the issues that you've said about their midfield and their defence in particular. What's unusual about Germany is that even though they're clearly going through a phase of rebuild after a disastrous 2018 World Cup and the decline after the 2014 World Cup win, and what seems to be quite a long rebuilding process, especially considering they're stuck with Joachim Löw, is that even though a lot of these players, think about Jonathan Tah, think about Niklas Süle, are young defensive players, they've actually been a part of the Germany system for a very long time, despite their age. So even though they're young and the next generation for Germany, they've been a part of all of this failure. They've been a part of all the systematic issues under Jurgen Löw over the last few years. They've had to cope with all of this. They're not a fresh injection of defensive energy into the German team. It feels like it's going to be a long rebuilding process. Going into like the Euros next year, I'm with you. I absolutely would not see Germany as a favourite. Realistically, going into the Qatar World Cup, I don't see them as a favourite then either. I think we might be waiting until, Euro 2024, assuming COVID's disappeared by then, to actually see Germany as having the time to become a true football powerhouse again. As for international results that interested me, Josh, I'm not going to lie, I haven't been following them that closely. I mean, Republic of Ireland looked pretty good, to be fair.
Under new management.
Northern Ireland looked quite good. Republic of Ireland didn't look good.
Both Irish teams under new management, to be fair, so a bit of a transition in terms of playing style. Yeah, Germany, I don't know, something's a bit off, and maybe they were too quick to cast aside Jerome Boateng and Thomas Muller, because obviously those guys are no longer kind of considered in the international fray, and both still regulars for Bayern Munich. So maybe that's a question worth asking. But anyway, that really concludes our international break. As the title suggests, it came and went. There were some things that I guess people raised eyebrows at, but most of the time people were just too busy to concentrate on it, which is fair enough considering everything going on in the world right now. Before we go into the Premier League, I'll do the kind of Raw Sport announcement section here. So next week, for Raw across the station are doing a lot of programming for Black History Month, and as a result, thanks to and a shout out to our former interviewee, Ed Ahrens, the Guardian sports deputy editor, who we interviewed for his book Made in Africa. Go and check that out, that interview. It's a really fascinating listen, but thanks to him, we were able to get into contact with Sean Campbell, who's the head of the Arthur Wharton Foundation. And for those who don't know, Arthur Wharton was the first African footballer to play in England back in the late 19th century. The late 19th century. Sorry, it took me a while to just figure my maths out. But yes, he is. I'm going to be speaking to Sean. It will probably be an interview that will be pre-recorded and then can kind of come on our channel just because of the availability. So that will probably release, I want to say Thursday, but again, I'll just drop the ticker with our socials. Just keep an eye on our socials. We will have all the information. The video description's got the Facebook group link and all that stuff. It will come out there. As I said, I mentioned at the top of the hour, Raw Sport Weekly will, as a result, not happen this week. We will, however, hope to do some coverage on the Formula One, reviewing the Eiffel Grand Prix, previewing the Algarve Grand Prix. We will hope to do that. Discussions underway. So again, just follow our socials in the video description and here. So that and yeah, we'll have announcements on that. And the Quaran-Stream will happen as usual on Saturday next week, as per. Just another quick thing, Jordan Maciel, we interviewed him on Wednesday. That is now on available to watch on YouTube. I know we did it on Facebook. It is now available to watch on YouTube, so you can watch it there. It's also on our Spotify podcast. It's a great listen. He is, as we made clear, he's a Warwick Uni graduate, so he's got a lot of advice for Warwick students in general, as well as those looking to break into sports journalism. And he shares some incredible insight on Hansi Flick, on Thiago, on Robert Lewandowski, as well as Dominic Szoboszlai as well. So there's a lot of really really interesting conversations there. So I would recommend everyone check those out. Joe, what do you want to say?
Yes, this is the time of the show where I immediately flagellate myself for predicting things wrong yet again. Only 5 minutes ago, Josh, I said that Sam Lammers was a massive regression from Alejandro Gomez, and that even though he's a striker by comparison to Gomez as a number 10, he would provide less attacking threat for Atalanta. You can probably guess who in the last 5 minutes has scored for Atalanta. Sam Lammers scoring in the 69th minute to make it 4-1. The comeback is well and truly on in Campania. I might get a stream for this game to see Gasperini throw everything to the wall with his 4 centre-backs and 2 full-backs. Ultra-defensive football, which somehow translates to a goal. But yeah, nice to know that within 5 minutes, the commentator's reverse curse that I have absolutely mastered over the last year or so has come true. Sam Lammers scoring for Atalanta right after I start him off.
And I will quickly add that Timo Werner has doubled Chelsea's lead. So it is 2-0 Chelsea against Southampton at Stamford Bridge. Again, it looks like Timo Werner has, I mean, granted, it was always going to take him time to get used to the Premier League, but 2 goals now, he looks like he's up and running, as many of us who followed the Bundesliga thought he would be. Also, a quick update in the Championship. Wycombe Wanderers lead Millwall 1-0. Huddersfield have a 1-0 away lead against Swansea. Rotherham lead Norwich City 1-0, and Barnsley lead Bristol City 1-0. All other games going on at the moment are goalless, including Blackburn, Nottingham Forest is goalless, and AFC Bournemouth against QPR, which I'm sure Sam Taylor will be watching with interest. So that's the score update, and that's the update. That's kind of our Raw Sport update, if you like, about programming. So bottom line is we will hopefully get an F1 show next week. Regardless of that, there will be a BHM interview next week as well, for sure, and the Quaran-Stream. And then after that, week 4, normal programming should resume. It was just for this week, things are slightly different. So with that all said, let's talk about the game that we have got that we can look back on. We've had a few hours to kind of digest, and that is Everton, the Merseyside derby, Everton 2, Liverpool 2, a very entertaining game. I watched most of it. I'm sure, Joe, you watched a bit of it as well. We had a red card at the end. We had a potential red card for a certain goalkeeper, VAR, obviously, and offsides controversies, and some interesting defending as well. So where do you want to start, Joe? I mean, what's the bigger... Was a draw a fair result, do you reckon, between these two teams?
I haven't actually seen an awful lot of the game, so a lot of the reporting that I'm going to be doing is from hearsay and, let's be honest, Twitter and whatever you tell me. Right. But it's very interesting after all the hype that we give Everton and saying that the Merseyside derby could actually have a clear winner. No, it's the same traditional draw, just a lot more entertaining than usual. The real story of the game, I think, is not necessarily a changing of the guard, but certainly teams bringing the challenge to the champions. Liverpool took the lead twice in this game and lost the lead twice in this game, with 2 very in-form English players for Everton, Michael Keane and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, a man who I have flip-flopped an opinion of so much over the last 18 months or so. But right now, I think he's one of the most impressive strikers in the Premier League, going to be one of the players of the season, scoring in the 81st minute yet again. I believe that means he's scored in either every single game or all but one of the Premier League so far. So definitely in contention for the Golden Boots. And another story from the game, not something I'm used to seeing from Liverpool Football Club, Virgil van Dijk being substituted in favour of Joe Gomez in the second half. That seems absolutely insane. If you told me that a year ago, impossible.
I might be able to provide an explanation for that sub, and I'll just quickly do that. That is to do with it is, and it was a shock. It's one of the controversies from the game, actually. Jordan Pickford went in very high, very late on Van Dijk. Escaped punishment because Van Dijk was ruled to be offside already, which kind of then cancelled out any play that followed the offside. So Van Dijk, that is why he had to come off, and Joe Gomez came on. Obviously, Joel Matip started in place of Gomez in the first place. But as he said, Calvert-Lewin is the first player to score in each of Everton's first 5 league games of a season since Tommy Lawton in 1938-39, which is quite the statistic when you think about it. That's amazing. It's quite the statistic. I mean, obviously, Everton again. This is a result that over recent times has not really gone their way. I mean, obviously, the Anfield results tend to be the more dominant Liverpool wins than the Goodison Park encounters, but still a very decent result. I mean, Liverpool obviously coming off that Aston Villa 7-2 horror show. It does feel like this was kind of the result they needed to kind of show that the defense was strong. And yet, I mean, I'll say the first goal, Michael Keane's header, that came from a set piece, but obviously Van Dijk was off the pitch, so maybe if he was there, they would have dealt with it. We don't know. And the second one, I guess it comes down to a striker who's just high in confidence. So defensively, I mean, Liverpool may have made a few improvements, but I guess this isn't the strong. This might have been a really good test for them, and they may have came through flying colours. I don't know. I guess it's up for people to judge on that one.
It feels like the international break could not have come at a better time for Liverpool Football Club. Yeah. I wouldn't say this game is much of a, return to glory by any means. They're the Premier League champions. With the players they have, they should, on paper, be able to beat Everton, even at Goodison Park, especially without fans cursing every single one of their starting 11 in Goodison Park this year. But yeah, far from surprising that the Goodison Park game ended in a draw. I'm just happy that it didn't end in like a 94th minute disaster goal from a defensive shocker from Divock Origi like it did a couple of years ago. Nice to see Andre Gomes have a good game, even though he was taken off in the second half. Another strong performance at left back from my boy Luca Digne. Very impressed. I just think it's very, very unusual that for all the fetishization that we've seen of managers like Frank Lampard, starting these young English players and developing them so well, Carlo Ancelotti, the old Italian guy, offloading young Italian players like Moise Kean to PSG and giving a real opportunity to develop and start players like Michael Keane and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Potential candidate for manager of the season if they continue up with this run of form towards the end of the year. Yeah, and two teams that have obviously done a lot of, Everton, it's more apparent this summer, but two teams that have done good recruiting, and obviously with two directors in football, and Marcel Brands and Michael Edwards. So I feel like this game, sure, if you're a Liverpool fan, I guess you'll feel slightly hard done by, and we should say that Jordan Henderson had a late winner ruled out due to offside, which was overturned by VAR. But I don't know. It's a game that I don't feel like it was an entertaining game that both sides will come away with maybe slightly disappointed, but I don't think anyone's, it's not a catastrophic result by any means, I don't feel. Yeah, fair enough. I think that there's a lot of positives that you can take from it either way. From what I've seen, which admittedly is very little, the attacking football actually looked pretty good on both sides. And even though Everton did ship 2 goals, defensively they didn't look suspect, which is a damn sight better than you could say about them under Marco Silva. So real improvement coming in under Carlo Ancelotti, as we would have expected. I can't believe I actually doubted that man's credentials after what happened at Napoli last year. Of course, he's one of the best managers in the world. Everton are very lucky to have him. Potential Champions League contenders. Early, but potential.
Yeah, I would say that. I wonder if you're Everton, if you were given the choice between Gattuso and Ancelotti, who would you take at this moment in time? It does feel... Go on.
It's just benefited both clubs, hasn't it? Ancelotti clearly wasn't working at Napoli. I love Gennaro Gattuso personally. I think he's he's a fantastic coach, but I actually think he's a better manager than a lot of people give him credit for. But Ancelotti to Everton is just something that I never thought would work. I never expected that would come off. But so far, yet again, I've predicted something unbelievably wrong. Just wait for Sam Lammers to score a second goal for Atalanta in the next 5 minutes, just to really rub salt in the wound. But yeah, I'm really impressed by what I've seen from Everton, especially their midfield.
Yeah, I still feel the question marks over Pickford. I think if you look at the chat, and I know I explained to you the challenge. If you look at it on replay, there is a red card sending off, and
yeah,
I'm sure there'll be discussions. Yeah, I'm sure.
Like, at least they've brought in a rotation option for him now. Like Robin Olsen is someone who is, as someone who would say, like Robin Olsen is a much better goalkeeper than a lot of Roma fans will have you believe he was. He was actually scapegoated an awful lot in the second half of that season. But you know, he's more than good enough to give Pickford a bit of competition. He's a very, very good backup keeper. And if Pickford keeps making these mistakes, you know, Olsen, say what you like about his ability, like how bad he is with the ball at his feet. He's calm. He doesn't make stupid mistakes. He doesn't, you know, do taekwondo kicks on opposition players. So yeah, Pickford does need to be careful. And I think it's actually a good signing for Jordan Pickford, not just for Everton Football Club.
Yeah. Again, I feel like both teams that we will be talking plenty about as the season goes on. So an entertaining game to start the week. And obviously Chelsea, as we said, 2-0 up at Southampton at the moment. And then a bunch of other games. I guess the other big one is in a couple of hours, and that is Manchester City versus Arsenal. Some quick team news. Obviously, City without Gabriel Jesus, without Kevin De Bruyne, which is a significant absences. Jesus, because there is no Aguero either. And then as for Arsenal, obviously, you have a potential debut for Thomas Partey. I know Kieran Tierney was self-isolating, so we don't know whether he will be able to play or not. But City, Arsenal, I mean, these two teams, recent times, Arteta has actually got the better of Guardiola. So this should be an interesting game, shouldn't it?
Start David Luiz, see if he can put up another 8 out of 10 performance to really hammer home the pain on Manchester City. And I mean, trajectory of the two clubs, especially at the back, which is obviously the area that I like to focus on so much in the Premier League. Arsenal is very much going up, Man City very much going down, especially in recent weeks. So, you know, it seems really unusual. You know, if you'd said this to me a year or so ago, that Arsenal would actually pose a threat to Manchester City, wouldn't have believed you. But right now, it really does seem to be the case. I just really want to know who Arsenal are going to start at the back today. I'd like to see Gabriel start because I have him tipped as like one of the best signings of the season. But David Luiz, he was very good in that FA Cup final, and you know, since that absolute horror show, he's done fairly well for Arsenal, low key. So don't know what's going to happen there.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think you would be right. I would start Gabriel, and I'd probably, and when you look at it, I guess you would probably start David Luiz. I mean, I assume David Luiz doesn't. I mean, I assume he's not in the Brazilian squad anymore, so he's probably had 2 weeks to kind of prepare for this, and then yeah, no. I think those two. If you start those two, that should be interesting. I'm very interested how. I mean, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this. Who does City? Without De Bruyne, without Jesus, and obviously Aguero has been ruled out for a while. The attacking, do they play Sterling as a false 9? Do they play, do they play Phil Foden as a false 9, or do they chuck in maybe young Liam Delap as the front forward? What would you do if you were Pep Guardiola in terms of lining up an attacking lineup against Arsenal?
I've never been personally very impressed whenever I've seen Raheem Sterling play down the middle, either for club or country, irrespective of what that club is, Liverpool or Manchester City. So I feel like with Sterling, he's one of the best wingers in the league. You need to keep him out wide, use his dribbling, use his ability to cut inside, especially against a team that, you know, is using presumably wing backs today in Arsenal Football Club. But yeah, the striking issue is absolutely massive, Josh. I really don't think there is an easy answer. If they're going to like put a youngster up front, I suspect it will only be in the second half. It doesn't seem like a very Pep thing to do against his understudy and a potential top 6 team in Arsenal. So I would cautiously say maybe Phil Foden. But again, I rate Foden so much in that midfield that I don't want Pep Guardiola to do what he did with Rodri last year and fart around with all these positions that the players never played before and end up kiboshing their entire year. This is Phil Foden's year to prove that he is one of the best young players in the world, in my eye. Well, best young midfielders in the world. If this injury problem, if he starts being played out of position, he will go the way of Rodri last year. He will go the way of Fernandinho last year. And that's not in anyone's interests. Certainly not England as well, going into Euro 2021.
I stand corrected. Aguero is fit, but Does he start? I don't know because
I don't know.
For a while. Quick update: Southampton have replied, and Danny Ings has scored for Southampton. So it's 2-1 at the Bridge. So Southampton could be coming back into it, and a decent and a very good Southampton side too. So maybe, just maybe, there might be more problems for Chelsea than we originally thought. As far as I know, there's no goals across in other games. Although Swansea have hit back, they are 1-1 against Huddersfield. Andre Ayew scores a penalty, and that appears to be there have literally been no other goals so far. But it should be an interesting one. What City do? I do feel someone is going to be played out of position. It's just a case of who, maybe. But obviously, when you look at City's depth on the wings, Mahrez, Ferran Torres, they've got plenty of options to play in that wing. It's just kind of finding that one person to kind of shoehorn into that central position. And so that should be a very interesting one. But Thomas Partey, there's a lot of discussion that he might start. How do you think he'll stack up against City's midfield, do you reckon?
You see, I never saw Partey as the option for Arsenal in midfield. On the last stream, I'm on record as having said that I think Houssam Aouar would do very well in the Premier League. Obviously, that deal never happened. I also really rate Lucas Torreira, despite his massive decline after the first few months. Again, physical conditioning failing at Arsenal. I wanted him to be given a chance. He's not there anymore. So ultimately, I'm left with the option that I know the least about in terms of Arsenal's system. I just do not know how this Thomas Partey signing is going to work out in the long run. I know that Ben and Sam last week were saying that they think he works very well. I'm prepared to agree with them because ultimately I don't have enough to disagree with them. But again, I don't want a player of Partey's quality to be rushed into the team without adequate preparation. And I know Arsenal needed to improve in that midfield area, but it's far from an overwhelmingly defective part of their starting 11 at the moment. And without Kevin De Bruyne, I think Arteta will have the time to transition towards Partey slowly rather than start him immediately. But it's not like the midfield for Manchester City is going to be at its best this afternoon. Saying that, just watch Phil Foden score 3 goals from 30 yards out or something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if City, do they retreat into their own half as they kind of have done in previous games, or do they kind of, press up the field but then potentially leave gaps at the back? So a really interesting game. Do you have any predictions? Do you have any score predictions of how it's going to go?
I reckon it's going to be score draw 1-1.
Okay. I'm going to go 2-2 just because I feel like I don't see this goal boom ending anytime soon. Certainly not in this game between two teams who defensively have been suspect at times, but two teams that are obviously can attack as well. So yeah, I'm going to go 2-2 on that one. I mean, other games. Let's talk Spurs West Ham, because there's reports that Gareth Bale may start for Spurs. Obviously not confirmed, and suddenly it does feel like Spurs have a lot of attacking options to choose from. What do we expect? I mean, if say Gareth Bale does start against West Ham, it would be wrong to kind of expect the world out of him from the first game, right? You'd expect him to kind of need some time to get bedded into the system.
I mean, it'd take a bit of time for Gareth Bale to get bedded back into football as opposed to playing golf over in Spain. So, again, don't expect the absolute world from him straight away. He comes in with an awful lot of expectation. I feel like there'd be less expectation on Gareth Bale if he'd gone to most other big English clubs. The fact that he's returning to Tottenham Hotspur, where, he had an absolutely amazing time, both at fullback and indeed at winger, single-handedly ending Icon's career as a top-class fullback in just one game. We're not going to get that kind of performance from Gareth Bale. I feel like a game against a team like West Ham, not a derby, but certainly a London grudge match, two teams that don't especially like each other, a team that also aren't particularly strong on the wings, despite a very strong showing against Wolves a few weeks ago. Gareth Bale, if you stick him up against Masuaku, who's in a decent run of form, that could be an interesting matchup this afternoon. But again, I feel like this is a game where you can get away with starting Gareth Bale over Eric Lamela. That feels really unusual to say, but this is a game where I would rotate just a little bit. I think the real key in this game is going to be, as it was against Manchester United, the deep midfielders. I want to see Pierre-Emile Højbjerg have another fantastic game, because so far this year he's been one of the most impressive midfielders in the top 5 leagues.
I mean, a few takeaways. First of all, you've made me look up Maicon just to see what he's up to, and then you forget he has 76 caps for Brazil.
Oh yeah,
I did somehow. I mean, I knew he had played for Man City, and so I had to check. But he did join them for a bit. Obviously, he joined your Roma as well. So yes, Maicon. I wonder what he's doing. Yeah, I wonder how he's getting on. He's probably not watching those highlights of that Bale versus him encounter wherever he is in Brazil. But on a more serious note, yeah, it should be an interesting one. Højbjerg against Declan Rice. That is kind of the midfield battle we're expecting. Obviously not the most entertaining one by any means, but in terms of the roles they play for their sides, their respective teams, it should be an interesting one. And West Ham, look, when we had Luke James on a few weeks ago for the Freshers week 1, we were saying Leicester was going to be quite the tough game for West Ham, and yet somehow they upset the form book, and then they took apart Leicester. So who knows what West Ham side we're going to see. Obviously, they've just signed Benrahma from Brentford as well, so they've boosted by that signing.
I thought he'd failed the medical.
Now, right, so some conflicting reports, because David Moyes was asked about it, and he said, no, there's been nothing wrong with the medical. And so whether it was a bit of a negotiation tactic, whether there was something behind the scenes, I don't know. Obviously, the move was going to be permanent. Now it's a loan with the option to buy, I think, or an obligation to buy. I need to check for sure which one it is. But bottom line, he has made his way up to East London. He has crossed the London metropolis, but yeah, it was a confusing one that Friday afternoon to read those reports.
Yes, yeah, and of all the clubs for confusing reports to be coming out of, I don't trust Karen Brady and Gordon Sullivan to report on this maturely on their Twitter accounts as well. They've caused so much trouble in the past, like slagging off Robert Snodgrass, even though he was still on their payroll at the time. I have a feeling this is going to be a story for the next few days among West Ham fans. But it's funny you mentioned Luke James, and I know a few West Ham fans, we both do, obviously, being a university in the Midlands of the country. I've never known a club where they have these amazing results, beating Leicester, smashing Wolves, and there's still no optimism for the season whatsoever. Those 6 points could probably save West Ham come the end of the season.
Yeah.
And yet they just have no hope. Like, Masuaku's in a great run of form. Fornals is playing really well. Even Sebastian Laer is scoring. No, we're terrible. We're still under threat of relegation. Cheer up.
They're in a very nice stadium as well, and
paid for by the taxpayer. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, geez, some get lucky, I guess. But and they're obviously in the Premier League, which many clubs in England would die for that opportunity as well. So, yeah. So they have Benrahma. I mean, I admittedly have not seen a whole lot of him in the Championship. I know he comes very highly regarded, and obviously I've seen some highlights of his time at Brentford. But an attacking player that kind of gets bums off seats and makes things happen, that is sort of the type of profile of signing West Ham need, don't they? I mean, we've not seen someone like that since arguably Dimitri Payet.
In that kind of mould, we haven't seen a player like that since Payet, maybe even further back, because I feel like Payet is more of a dedicated wing-ready player than Said Benrahma is. It's unusual that West Ham seems to fluctuate between signing very creative players to play attractive styles of football, and then when you bring in someone like David Moyes, you sign Thomas Soucek, you start him in between Mark Noble and Declan Rice. Yet again, we don't even know the kind of team that West Ham are building, let alone who they're going to start come on match day. But at the very least, they have got a lot of central midfielders. Whether or not they fit together in any kind of cohesive starting 11, we still don't know. No one knows, Josh. It's West Ham United.
Yep, you talk about those, I don't know what's the word, bipolar teams, I guess. It would be West Ham would be very much high up on the list. But that should be an interesting game. Tottenham, West Ham, obviously, London derby. should be an interesting one. I don't know about you. I'm guessing. I assume Tottenham will get the job done, and I assume the West Ham I'm going to see is the one that has defensive issues and isn't able to fashion many chances. So I'm assuming a 2. I'll say 3-1 Tottenham. I don't know about you.
2-0.
Okay. But we might. I mean, look, we might have just jinxed Tottenham and set up West Ham for success, as Luke James did a few weeks ago. So watch how we somehow inspire West Ham to one of their best Premier League campaigns. Hey,
that would be fantastic if we reverse curse West Ham United to if we managed to end up the season West Ham getting more points than they did in their last year at the Bowling Ground entirely because of us underestimating them. That'd be one hell of a story. If Saeed Benrahma could become basically the equivalent of what Dimitri Payet was in that campaign as well, and then he throws a tantrum and gets transferred to Marseille next year or something.
Oh man, I mean, I don't know if Marseille could afford him, given the recent issues with French TV not wanting to pay their clubs at the moment. But I mean, he'd be a very good signing in Marseille for sure. I mean, look at it. I mean, we were speaking of people we've had on this show. We've had Jay Smalley on, who's a Newcastle fan. We've had Ben Parkinson, who commented earlier as a Man United fan. So I feel like it is only right that we kind of offer our perspective on that game. Newcastle, Man United. It does feel like a bit of a bogey test for United. Obviously, they lost last year thanks to that Longstaff goal, Matty Longstaff coming on and scoring. On what was, I believe, it was his Premier League debut, wasn't it? It was one of his first Premier League games, and he came off the bench and scored. And obviously, Man United are very low on confidence. So does this have all the hallmarks of a potential surprise? I don't want to say an upset or a shock, but a surprise result?
I mean, a lot of the hype that I've piled on Newcastle this year has been in light of their attacking signings, Callum Wilson in particular, and just seeing that, like, the clutch factor that they have late in on the game. It feels like Newcastle control their stamina an awful lot better than a lot of teams towards the top of the table do. So I can see with Manchester United's well-established defensive problems at the start of this year having an issue towards the end of the game. I don't think it's a guaranteed win for Manchester United by any means, although I mean that more as a compliment towards Newcastle, actually, at the beginning of this season. Been quite impressed by what I've seen from them, with the exception of the showing against Brighton. This is going to be an interesting game. Again, I don't want to harp on about this Harry Maguire problem, but I really want to know what Manchester United are going to do at the back, because can you start him in the current run of form he's in? The guy needs time off. Like, the guy needs to get his head in check. Like, rather than dropping him from the captaincy, surely it makes sense just to give him a game or so off, let someone else come in and actually give the captain's armband to someone else. And see if there is, an impromptu leader at Manchester United, even if there isn't one that immediately screams out to you from the roster.
Yeah, I mean, David De Gea against Ukraine, obviously they lost, and some have kind of pointed at his positioning as being at fault for that goal as well. So he's not coming off the greatest form either. Victor Lindelof obviously played in the Swedish team that just conceded 3 goals against Portugal. And as Ben is saying, we'll talk about PSG United as well, because that's who United have coming up. And
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, that's why. Goodness me, this does feel like a bit of a baptism of fire for Solskjaer. And arguably, I don't want to forecast any managerial changes by any means, but this does feel like a really crucial period for him.
Yeah, it feels like a period where, even though he's been dealt a pretty rough hand in terms of transfers, of course he wanted 3 players in the summer transfer window. Manchester United did not go out and sign any of them, 2 of them actually ending up staying at Borussia Dortmund in particular. So, Solskjaer hasn't got the team he wants. He's got players in really bad runs of form, although, to be fair, David De Gea is in a bad run of form, just like every other major Spanish goalkeeper that would be in contention for a place in the national team. So, he survives in the Spanish team basically because everyone else is terrible. I suspect he's still going to be given enough chances at Manchester United. I mean, the problems at centre-back, you can't blame Solskjaer really for what's happened with Harry Maguire, especially in terms of his headspace. So, Solskjaer has been dealt a really bad hand at the start of this year. If he can come through this okay, that kind of proves he's got a bit more staying power than we think. But again, as I'm sure Ben probably agrees with me, just because the board have screwed up, just because circumstances are against you, doesn't mean you can take the eye off Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And it is amazing how many people in the English sporting media that are associated with Man United, in particular Gary Neville, just will not say one bad thing about him, despite the shocking run of results they've had under him on several occasions. It's just weird.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Paul Pogba's recent. He was recently in the news for. Obviously, he said in a press conference about how he would love to join Real Madrid at some point. It feels a bit like Eden Hazard of a few years ago. But then it then came out that United had actually extended his contract by another year, and they did so before Pogba made those comments. Which I'm sure, if they did this all over again, they'd have loved to know that Pogba was considering a move away. So again, another slightly baffling decision. It does feel like they didn't talk to Pogba at all when making that decision. And I am curious to know Ben's thoughts on Pogba, whether it's a case of should he go or should you keep him? Should we keep him in? You're good.
Yeah, all good.
There we go. I covered up. I was ready. Here's Ben. He says, yeah, Pochettino.
No, you're not one of those fans. Come on, never cheer for your team to lose. That's what Arsenal fans were doing against Eintracht. That's just sad. Always cheer your team on.
You know what's the funny thing about that Eintracht result? Every time, and I obviously say this as someone who writes for Get German Football News, but every time they post something about Daichi Kamada, you'll get a flurry of Arsenal fans going, our favourite player.
Yeah,
and I love Daichi Kamada. I think he's a great player. But it is quite funny that how these players get cult followings for helping their team lose. It says a lot about the sporting fan culture at the moment.
If you said that in front of a fan from like Spain or Germany, like, oh, why do you love this player that that plays for a club that you have nothing to do with? Oh, they got our manager sacked. What? It's just ridiculous. But I mean, I don't even would Pochettino be an especially? Obviously, Pochettino is a great manager. I'm not questioning his credentials whatsoever. Is this a good time for him to join Manchester United? Really?
That is a tough choice. That is a tough one because, again, it does feel like everything would happen all over again. United would try offload the players as surplus to requirements. Would they succeed in doing that? They didn't this summer. They got rid of Smalling, but that was because Smalling was given a year to show off what he could do and generate interest. If I don't know about. I know Ben's watching, but Marcus Rojo, surely he needs to go on loan to show off his qualities before you get rid of him, because you can't just buy Marcus Rojo on the evidence of games from like a few years ago. That doesn't make sense financially. So I don't know. It feels like Pochettino, that would happen all over again, and then more money would be spent. And I don't. It's interesting. What would be the most ideal project for Pochettino to join at the moment? Would it be a United? Would it be we don't know about Pep Guardiola's future come at the end of the season. It'd be very interesting, and he has got back to me on Pogba, so we'll just put that up for everyone to have a look. Yeah, I totally agree. You can't have it. It's a bit like a will he, won't he? That kind of needs to get resolved at some point.
I mean, it's funny that in the comment it says, again, shows no leadership. I don't know whether that's in reference to the Manchester United board or Paul Pogba specifically. It works pretty well for both. What I want to know is, if Manchester United were able to get a fee for Paul Pogba, just how much would the loss on that initial investment be? Because surely you can't pay more than 50 million for him at the moment. Even like a big club like Real Madrid, why would you pay more than 50 million for Paul Pogba based on his form at Manchester United over the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, and again, whole Man United themed show could be something we do in the future. But anyway, we've kind of strayed away from previewing Newcastle United. I mean, I'm saying this, for like Newcastle fans like Jay, there is every chance that we could see Callum Wilson bullying the United centre backs. There is every chance we could see the likes of Jeff Hendrick. I know Jay wasn't too high on Jeff Hendrick, but there is every chance we see him kind of running the midfield a bit in this game. And what I mean, Newcastle have shown, and they've beaten United before last year. There is a definite chance. And obviously, even with the likes of, I know Jamal Lascelles is injured, but like a Federico Fernandez pairing with maybe Fabian Schär, something that actually looks like a very solid back two.
I think Schär might be suspended on account of the fact that he got a red card in his last game. So, I'm not sure, but I feel like that could have a bit of an... Oh, no, or was it the international break he got suspended in, playing for Switzerland? I think that might have been it. So, yeah, Fabian Schär, Federico... Yeah, Federico Fernandez, Fabian Schär is a very good mid-table Premier League defence. In particular, Schär was part of Raw Sports Team of the Season only a couple of years ago, and deservedly so, I'd argue. I'm not saying that they're a better team than Manchester United on paper. There's definitely the chance that, like I said, these clutch signings, and what is a defensively solid unit, if not particularly impressive, could do something against Manchester United. But again, I said this about Liverpool. I think I have to say it about Manchester United as well. International break could have just come at the perfect time for this football club. They desperately needed something after that result against Tottenham. A couple weeks off may well just be in the interests of the club, because after a performance like that, surely the best thing is not to have another game that next weekend.
Yeah. In terms of predictions, I'm going to say I'll say 2-1 United. But again, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in that prediction. I'm just going to go off the back of star quality, should probably just swing it.
Yeah, 2-1 Manchester United. Specifically, it will be won by a Bruno Fernandes penalty, because we live in the cursed timeline.
That's so probably true. Ben, if you are watching, let us know what your prediction is, mate. We'd love to hear it. I have just
3-0 Newcastle.
Going very off topic, but I am in a Yahoo NFL Fantasy League. This has nothing to do with the Raw Sport Warwick Wolves NFL Fantasy League, but I have just had a trade offer accepted, so I'm very interested. And I know you're a fan of NFL, so I'll tell you, I am giving up Mike Evans to get Julio Jones.
Okay, interesting. Mike Evans, one of the two very highly regarded Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers.
Who are about to... Tampa Bay are just about to... They are going to get Chris Godwin back from injury. So that's my reasoning is the target share is going to go down.
Okay, that makes sense. And of course, Julio Jones, even though he is... Well, I was going to say ancient. He's 31. It's a veteran age in American football for the Atlanta Falcons. But the Falcons not having an amazing start to the season in a very difficult division as well.
It's a gamble. It is a bit of a gamble.
But I approve of the risk. Yeah. But I'm way too conservative when it comes to trades like this to have thrown something like that, especially with star wide receivers.
We're not doing an NFL show, but I don't know about, when Godwin comes back, I don't really know what the target share is going to be with him and Evans, if they're going to split. And then obviously Jones is obviously the number one option for Atlanta. Obviously you got Calvin Ridley, but I think Jones is probably going to be your go-to guy. Obviously and the guy I'm trading with is not doing that well in his league. So I'm trying to capitalize on the losing record. So there's also that. So
it's like signing players from a relegated club, isn't it?
Yeah, there's Ben's prediction, 2-2. So not quite a defeat for United, but a draw and a Bruno penalty. I think, if anything you can count as a guarantee, it's probably going to be a Bruno Fernandes penalty. Before we... Actually, we'll wrap up. Let's wrap up the Premier League and then we'll do a quick score update. So again, looking at other games, I feel like for Carl Henningway's sake, we should probably just a quick word of Palace Brighton, an interesting game. I feel like it'll be a low scoring game. I don't know about you, but I do feel I do actually give Brighton the edge. It's going to be an interesting one. I do think it's going to be actually no. I'm going to say 1-1 draw.
I mean, this is technically a derby. I'm not allowed to say why former Raw member Luke Brooks said it was a derby. It's not really suitable for on-air broadcasting.
No.
But yeah, could well be a grudge match. Good job that the fans aren't in the stadium. I'm gonna say a 1-1 draw, but I'm with you. I think Brighton are the better team. I rate Graham Potter higher than Roy Hodgson, which I know is going to annoy some people, but I really don't care. Yeah, I think it's going to be a draw, though. I'd be interested to see who Crystal Palace are going to start in goal after signing Jack Butland. Hopefully, Gaita.
I think it'll be Gaita. I'm for fantasy Premier League sake, and by the way, you can join. Just a quick plug. You can just join our league, the Boar Raw Sport League, Fantasy League, for those who like playing FPL. I have Tyreek Mitchell, and it looks like Patrick Van Aanholt's back from injury, so that could be a big upgrade for Palace at the left back spot. Yeah, should be an interesting one. Like I said, 1-1 for that one. Other games that kind of catch my eye, and I don't have to catch yours as well. Leicester, Aston Villa is a very interesting one. Obviously, Villa riding very high, and Leicester with some. I believe they're going to be without Johnny Evans for this game. They're going to be without Soyuncu for this game. Vardy's carrying a knock. It again could be a. I don't really want to say surprise anymore because Villa have been playing very well, but it could be an away victory for Villains.
Yeah, I mean, two teams that we had an awful lot of doubts about going into the season actually doing very well in terms of form. I'm not completely sold on performances, but yeah, they've done better than we expected. You know, again, I don't want to bring this back to the England national team, but it's James Maddison versus Jack Grealish. That position in the England team, assuming that Gareth Southgate is able to ignore Mason Mount for 10 seconds, Grealish and Maddison are the players that are in competition for that spot. They've both done well for England. Grealish is riding high. Maddison's had a good, let's be honest, couple of years in the English Football League. I think this is going to be a game defined by them. Who can be the most creative in that central area?
Not only that, you obviously have Harvey Barnes, who's just come off his England debut as well, and you've got Ross Barkley on the other side for Villa as well, who will be trying to get back into that England squad. So definitely a lot of talent out there as well, and you know, who knows? Ollie Watkins, if he keeps playing at the way he's playing at the moment, he could force his way into an England call up as well. So a very interesting game. That one's really hard to call. I'm struggling. You're watching me struggle here with a prediction. I'm gonna say, I kind of swing. I mean, home advantage isn't really a thing anymore, which is the even more confusing thing. But I guess I go 2-1 Leicester on that one.
3-2 Aston Villa with at least one red card for Leicester.
All right, I'm going to predict a controversial offside call. I'm going to say anything that happens in this game.
Come on, it's the Premier League. That happens every 20 minutes. Yeah, of course. The way
Vardy and Watkins kind of play that kind of on the break, on the counter-attack kind of play, I feel like something's going to happen there. Rounding off the weekend, Leeds Wolves is a very interesting one as well, for tactical reasons. Bielsa Santo. That one's a really interesting one because obviously Bielsa plays with four at the back, but his fullbacks get very high up the pitch, and Wolves are known for playing with wing-backs by now. So again, a very interesting one, specifically on the wings. Who do you give the edge to on that one?
I mean, on paper, I'd definitely give the advantage to Wolves, but I still can't ignore, international break or not, what happened against West Ham a few weeks ago. At Ellen Road, I know you say home field advantage doesn't exist. I actually think Leeds are going to pull off a 1-0 win in this game. Calvin Phillips is going to be absolutely crucial, unlocking a bit of creative flair in that central area. And if Patrick Bamford is able to make me look like an idiot yet again and score another Premier League goal after all the criticism I've given for him, that'll just be the icing on the cake as well. Leeds 1-0 over Wolves.
I will go at the same. I think Bamford obviously was not called up for England, so I think he's had some time to kind of rest up, and then Jimenez and Traore were busy on international duties. So on the basis of that, I kind of like you. I give Leeds the edge in that one, and that will probably do it for for our sort of Premier League update. In terms of previewing this week's action, obviously we'll have all of this to review next week, as well as next week's game to preview as well. So we should have a lot more. It's very hard to kind of make predictions, isn't it, Joe? But coming off an international break, it's very hard to kind of, offer something without, obviously we're 2 weeks removed, so we don't have everything that happened 2 weeks ago. It sort of goes out the window. It's quite hard, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I'm really enjoying the Premier League at the moment, though, despite the defensive mess it is. Like a little bit of a changing of the guard. Everton and Tottenham. I mean, I knew Everton were going to be good. Tottenham have completely surprised me with how good they've been, so I'll be following them quite closely. But yeah, Leeds versus Wolves. I was going to point out earlier as the game I'm actually looking forward to this weekend. I want to, if assuming Ruben Neves is playing for Wolves, I want to see him versus Calvin Phillips, who can create the most mayhem from deep, either in terms of scoring long distance goals or finding crucial passes. So yeah, that's the game I'm looking forward to this weekend.
One of the funniest tweets I saw the weekend was obviously when Ronaldo got COVID. There was I think a Wolves reporter tweeted, "Oh no, the Wolves team might be at risk at picking up COVID because obviously the Portuguese connection." I found that quite hilarious. Quick goal update: still 2-1 Chelsea Southampton. Still Chelsea kind of. It seems like Southampton have kind of picked up throughout the second half, so it might be one to watch in the last 10 minutes for sure to see if they can hold on to that. I know Napoli Atalanta has finished. Do you have any? Obviously, no more goals added after the Sam Lammers one. Any thoughts?
No more goals from Sam Lammers, so I can retain some degree of decency. Although I believe 2 goals in 4 games for the numbers at the beginning of the year, so I'll be keeping an eye on him because, of course, I love my young players. Look, an absolute blitz from Napoli, though. Gattuso, I mean, they lost Alan this summer, but Gattuso has done really well with rejuvenating that Napoli midfield. Some underperforming players. A goal for Matteo Politano as well, who's managed to escape a bad run of form at Inter Milan. He was set to join his old club, Roma. He went to Napoli. He's actually done really well since then. A great performance from Victor Osimhen as well, a new signing from Lille. 2 goals for Hirving Lozano. We're beginning to see these young attacking players that Napoli have invested so heavily in scoring very well. It's going to be a good season for them, I suspect, and for Atalanta as well, because let's be honest, this is far from an embarrassing result. But I believe, Josh, I mean, we'll talk about this later, no doubt, but the lineups will be out for the Derby della Madonnina, Inter versus AC Milan. Probably the biggest game of the weekend. Talk about that in a little bit, because the lineups look very strong.
Yeah, well, I'm very interested to see what both sides have gone for. Championship update: Millwall have equalised against Wycombe Wanderers. Jed Wallace with a penalty in the second half. Stoke have gone 2-0 up away at Luton. Stephen Fletcher, I forgot he played for Stoke, has scored, as has Nick Powell. 2 names I did not. They were in my consciousness. I just didn't realize they played for Stoke. Brentford are 2-0 up at home to Coventry, so not great for our sort of local Sky Blues. Ivan Toney with a brace in the second half. And Sheffield Wednesday have taken the lead away at Birmingham City. Barry Bannon scored, so not great outcome for those 2 Midlands clubs. Also, Bristol City have turned it around against Barnsley. They now lead 2-1 thanks to goals from Hunt and Backinson. And for Sam Taylor, QPR still goalless against Bournemouth. And then in the Bundesliga, and actually, no, it's 3-2 Chelsea. Chelsea lead 3-2 from Southampton. In the space of minutes, Che Adams equalised, and then Kai Havertz scored. So, and as far as I know, I'm sort of half expecting a VAR update or something like that. But very interesting. And all I have is the BBC Live text going in response to Adams's goal. 2 words: "Oh, Kepa." So I assume the worst for the Spaniard.
The curse of the Spanish goalkeepers.
Honestly, not many are doing very well at the moment.
De Gea, bad. Well, Kepa, bad. Pau Lopez, bad. Even like Unai Simon and Checo Alvarez are having a bad time of it. There are no great Spanish goalkeepers at the moment. And a year ago, you would have had there were 3 or 4.
Bring back, Iker Casillas still plays for Porto, right? Bring him back. Pepe Reina, I think, is a free agent. So you could bring him. Oh, no, he's not. He is at
Lazio. No, yes, not Lazio.
He's at Lazio.
Hold on.
I believe he's at Lazio. But bring them both back to kind of rescue the Spanish goalkeeping union. who are struggling at the moment. But anyway, 3-2. That is a fascinating. That is a really, really fascinating game to kind of watch. That I'll be watching the highlights of. Dortmund lead 1-0 away at Hoffenheim. Marco Reus has scored, which is great because he's obviously had his fair share of injuries. Stuttgart lead 2-0 away. I mean, you talk about West Ham being the Jekyll and Hyde team of the Premier League. Hertha Berlin are the Jekyll and Hyde team of the Bundesliga, and they are 2-0 down at home to Stuttgart, who are a promoted team. Gonzalo Castro doubling the lead, and then Leipzig in a top 5 clash between Augsburg and RB Leipzig. Leipzig have doubled the lead against Augsburg. Yusuf Poulsen has scored, so Leipzig now lead the Bundesliga at least. And yeah, they will. Even if Bayern beat Arminia Bielefeld, Leipzig will still lead the table. So who said the Bundesliga was boring?
Star Wars Imperial March music identifies as the Red Bull Empire leads the Bundesliga.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll talk a bit about Chelsea, but I mean, it is time to have. I mean, we've obviously got the Premier League going on, but we also have the Champions League coming back. Last week, as we said, we previewed the groups kind of more in general. I mean, this week, you and I guess, Joe, we can go through the individual matches of match day 1 specifically and kind of go through some of them. So we'll start with, I think it's Group E to H is the Tuesday. And I think the big one is, and you rightly had quite a reaction to it, PSG Man United.
Yeah, and I completely forgot that this game was around the corner as well. PSG have made some fairly unusual signings over the summer. Of course, Thomas Meunier departing at right back in the direction of Borussia Dortmund. They signed Alessandro Florenzi, the want-away/unwanted player, which seems crazy from Roma. He's had a fantastic start to the season at that right back position. Already 2 goals for Paris Saint-Germain. You can expect he's going to start. And, you know, whenever I've seen him play against United in the past, he's actually done fairly well. Granted, they're often in non-competition games. But when you consider the myriad of defensive problems that Manchester United have, and the fact that, their fullbacks, whether they're Luke Shaw, Brandon Williams, and especially Aaron Wan-Bissaka, aren't particularly great going forward, which is what Florenzi excels in, I imagine that's going to be a very unbalanced matchup between the two. I think I said last year, and I know this annoys every Liverpool fan out there, I thought PSG were the second best team in Europe last year. Yes, they've lost Thiago Silva. Yes, they've made some fairly unusual additions over the summer. They've also lost Choupo-Moting. Who cares? But yeah, I absolutely believe PSG are going to have a good season this year. I'm going to say it's a PSG win comfortably. But you just wait and see, a return, a repeat of what happened to got Solskjaer the job a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, if Ben is watching, please share your thoughts on this game. If you're afraid of this game, if you're nervous, do share. But it's interesting. Obviously, PSG played last night, and Neymar was not even in the squad. Obviously, so he's had a lot of time to recover for this game. Mbappe obviously played, but I mean, Mbappe taking on the likes of Maguire and Lindelof is going to be scary for United fans with Neymar as well. Certainly for the nerves. And even Pablo Sarabia looked good last night as well. So it's going to be a huge test for United. And even, the midfield battle as well should be a very interesting one with the likes of Idrissa Gueye or Marquinhos or and Herrera even again up against the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Donny van de Beek and whichever midfield United put together. So it should be a really interesting one. And we haven't even mentioned the Cavani thing, because Cavani, I don't know what his status is. I know he's unable to play this weekend because he's still kind of self-isolating. But if he plays against PSG, obviously narrative galore.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on whether or not his fitness is obviously up to scratch after a self-isolating period. And of course, such a late and, I was going to say unusual signing. It's far from unusual for Manchester United to do this, free agent striker, well into his 30s. But again, it's not the kind of move that you can recover from quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if Solskjaer took a while to introduce Cavani into the squad. But yeah, Herrera returning, Cavani returning to his former club. yeah, this is Angel Di Maria, of course. A lot of bad
Oh yeah.
sentiment from Manchester United fans still there. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
this is actually becoming a European rivalry of sorts between the two. Yeah, I'm looking forward to following this game on Twitter. Never mind actually watching the damn thing. This is going to be a great game to follow.
Factor in the drama of, what was it, 2 years ago, of their knockout tie, which United got for a late penalty. This should be a very interesting game. Absolutely. And PSG, for all, I mean, you talk about their qualities. Obviously, behind the scenes, it's not been going as quite serene. There's been disputes between Leonardo and Thomas Tuchel, and so it promises to be an exciting one. I'm gonna say, I know we've talked a lot about United and kind of harped on their issues, but I have to say 3-1 PSG. That's my prediction. 3-1.
Yeah, I was thinking roughly the same score. I think I'll go. I'm going to say 3-0. Not to underplay Manchester United's attack. I do think they've got a lot of great players there. Bad form notwithstanding, but I just think PSG are too good defensively.
Yeah, and here's Ben. Ben, let us know your score prediction. Where, I mean, it's not that you, I guess my thing is I do see United getting a goal. Like I do see that their quality will get them a goal. It's just defensively, I would be nervous for them, as Ben is, to be honest. So yeah, should be. I mean, it's a tough group as well, with Leipzig also playing at Istanbul, Besiktas. So that should be a very interesting one. I guess when you look at the other big fixtures on Tuesday, let's talk about Chelsea, Sevilla. Chelsea obviously in action right now against, and then you talk about Sevilla. There we go. So Ben's gone with the same as me, 3-1 PSG. Again, we might have just reverse jinxed PSG, which might be good for you, Ben. I don't know. Chelsea, Sevilla. Sevilla, as we said, a really disappointing loss. I mean, Granada, obviously a very good team in Spain, but a disappointing loss nonetheless. And Chelsea, let me just check the score. So I get it right. It is 3-2, but certainly Southampton are not making it very easy for them. Who knows what problems Sevilla could cause for the Chelsea side?
And certainly, like, defensive problems again. Feels like we're harping on at the same problems with the same clubs. But Chelsea, far from convincing at the back. There are a lot of game changers in that Sevilla team that could cause an awful lot of problems in the air. Think about Luke de Jong at striker. Took him ages to get off the mark for Sevilla, but he is actually a very dangerous striker when utilised correctly. What I think is interesting is, are Sevilla actually committed to getting as far in the Champions League this year as possible, or are they looking for that third place in the group onto yet another Europa League victory? And as an extension from that, are the players who impressed so much in the league and in the Europa League last year, think about players like Diego Carlos and Jules Koundé in defence. One of my favourite signings of last year, Lucas Ocampos out on the wings. He was my player of the year for La Liga, if La Liga had only been for the first 4 weeks. Are they going to be able to elevate their game into a Champions League setting? Personally, I think they will. I was very impressed by what I saw from Sevilla throughout most of last year. Easily deserving of Champions League football, and in a group with a depleted Rennes and a Krasnodar team that I don't rate that highly, I think Sevilla are going to win this group.
I mean, and it may be that you haven't seen this, but Jules Koundé tested positive for COVID recently, so that for me, puts a spanner in the works. I mean, Diego Carlos will obviously still be there, and I guess. I'm trying to remember who their centre. I mean, their centre back pairing. I guess Sergio Gomez may come in and play centre back for them. But yeah, Koundé out is a bit of a span in the works. I do feel like Sevilla, even without Koundé, I still give them a chance. I still give them a fighting chance. And I mean, if I'm looking at Chelsea's lineup, right, and they're playing the likes of Chilwell today, they're playing the likes of Azpilicueta, so you can only assume Reece James and Marcos Alonso probably get the start on Wednesday, unless they, keep the playing lineup as it is right now. You look at, they're playing Mount, they're playing Pulisic, they're playing Havertz, they're playing Werner, so maybe a Tammy Abraham comes in or whatever. For me, it does kind of sort of depend on how much Chelsea rotate their team. I guess it is the same question you asked of Sevilla: how committed are they to going far in this tournament? Well, judging from Chelsea's team selection today, they're playing a first starting team, their best team probably. So I'm also interested to see how much Lampard wants to go into the Sevilla game with all guns blazing or not.
Yeah, I'll say that the player I want to watch in this game most. I mean, I love Sevilla personally. They are probably my favourite La Liga team in general. I just want to see what Lucas Ocampos can do against an actual top club. Not that I rate Chelsea that unbelievably highly, but I want to see what he can do in the Champions League this year because my God, that man is impressive.
And as Ben will remember, Sevilla obviously gave United not a whole lot of problems, but suddenly they flipped the game with a switch, and suddenly United couldn't cope with that. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, no Sergio Reguilon, which is going to be really interesting to see what Sevilla do on that side as well. Because Reguilon, I believe he put in that cross for De Jong's header against United, so that was a turning point. So interesting one there. In terms of score predictions, I'm going to say a draw. I'm going to say a 2-2. I'm not expecting like a thriller like the Chelsea-Ajax game of last season, but I do think it's going to be a draw. 2-2.
I'm going to say 2-1 to Sevilla. Joan Jordan to score.
Yeah, interesting. He was the one who got sent off today. Not that rules him out of UEFA games, but exactly. Yeah. Interesting. That's the English interest on Tuesday. We'll get onto their Wednesday one in a sec. But in terms of high-profile games, I guess Lazio Dortmund springs to mind for me. That's a very interesting one. You and I, obviously, you follow the Italian league more closely than I do, and I kind of follow the German league more closely than you do. So we're well placed to talk about this game. And I would be. It's going to be. It depends. For me, it depends on how defensively prepared Lazio are, how they set up, I guess, for me. Because Dortmund against a highly defensive team, it's a bit like the issues Liverpool had when they first were under Klopp. Like, they couldn't really break down the well-organized teams. And I feel like that's the issue Dortmund will have against a Lazio team if they kind of choose to, Lucas Leiva, Luis Felipe, and they kind of play all these, like, they play deep and kind of really try and constrict the space for Dortmund.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Lazio in any European competition. I question how much they actually care about it. I mean, they should care about the Champions League, obviously, but I just feel like, again, I've said it already in this group. I think it's going to be Dortmund winning convincingly over Club Brugge in second, with Lazio maybe even finishing last in the group, just based on how dreadful they were in the Europa League group stage last year, a group stage which has made me love CFR Cluj-Napoca forever. But I do rate Lazio's defensive players very, very highly. I just don't know if, unlike the Sevilla team, I don't know if they're going to be able to elevate their performances to a Champions League level. Francesco Acerbi is a fantastic defender. Patrick and Radu, I'm not quite as convinced. I think it's going to be a comfortable win for Borussia Dortmund. I think it's this is one of those games where, and I'm not advocating sending fans back into stadiums with the situation at the moment. I really don't like the movement to get fans back into the stadiums in general, actually. But I kind of wish we could see Lazio and Dortmund fans interact with each other, because you won't find two more fan bases much more opposed than that.
Yeah, I'm having a look at Dortmund. Obviously, Dortmund have just beaten Hoffenheim 1-0. I'm looking at team selection. Haaland came off the bench. Royce came off the bench. There's so many guys that can definitely be starting on Tuesday night and really give Lazio problems. So yeah, I give Dortmund the edge. It's a solid win against Hoffenheim, I think, and I'll give them a world of confidence. So yeah, I'm going to say 2-1 Dortmund. You talk about exciting teams at the moment. Dortmund are very exciting to watch. The Augsburg defeat aside. So, yeah. The rest of the game is pretty standard on that Tuesday. So, I propose... is there any other... We haven't mentioned Group G, but obviously Juventus played Dinamo Kiev away. Barcelona play for Ferencváros. Did I pronounce it right? I hope I did.
Ferencváros, yeah, I think it's something like that.
Yeah, but okay, Barca played them at home. Leipzig played Istanbul at home, and then Rennes against Krasnodar. I mean, those games. Do we expect any surprise results?
What I am most interested in these games, honestly, how many goals can Leipzig put past Istanbul Başakşehir here? Because they've been awful at the beginning of this Turkish Super League season. That's one of the best teams in the league on paper, have had a shocking start. I believe they're still bottom of the table, only 1 point from, I think, 3 games so far. They were really bad in the Europa League group stage last year. I believe Roma won 4-0 against them. Wasn't even a great performance. This Leipzig team, Timo Werner or not, I reckon they could put 5 past Başakşehir here quite comfortably.
I mean, Leipzig was the team leading the Bundesliga at the moment, and in a group that could come down to goal difference. You're talking about PSG United, Leipzig, Istanbul. It could come down to head-to-head or goal difference. It could be those games against Istanbul, and I don't want to write off their chances by any means, but those games could make or break how the group kind of falls, like in terms of goal difference and head-to-heads.
I reckon Istanbul are going to concede minimum 20 goals in this group.
Oh boy! Well, that will be some grim reading for their fans as we look at Wednesday's fixtures, and Ajax Liverpool. That's an exciting one. Do we think much defending is going to actually happen in this game?
I mean, maybe from Ajax's side, I'm not entirely sure. It's difficult to read into this game because, again, I don't know what exactly Ajax are going to do. It's still too early in the season for Ajax to have effectively replaced the players that they've lost. I mean, and they're not so much players like Joel Veltman going to Brighton, but Serginho Dest, that's going to be a difficult player to replace, even with a youth academy that's that good. Players in Donny van der Beek goes without saying, that's a tough player to replace. Again, they've held on to players like Dusan Tadic, but it may just be too early in the season for us to see what this Ajax team is truly capable of. Then again, they're managed by Erik ten Hag. The guy's an absolute genius. I see him as one of the big managers of the next 20 years in world football. So far from out of the realms of possibility that Ajax win, but I would lean quite heavily towards Liverpool. 2-0.
I give Ajax a chance to score. I'll say 2-1 Liverpool. I'll be interested to see if young Ryan Gravenberch, I think is his name. I hope I pronounced it rightly, but I'll be interested to see he starts. He started very well, and again, a young Dutch talent, and who could certainly make his. I mean, talk about the stage that this is. You play well in this game, and suddenly you've announced yourself to the world. So, very interesting to see about Ajax. In a game that I think both sides play very attractive styles of football. So I'm very excited to see about, and I'm interested to see if any of them kind of temper their styles for their opponent, although I highly doubt it, to be honest.
Yeah, not really much more to say about this game, actually. I think it's going to be, your question, who's going to defend more? That's what comes out of this, because I think on paper, Liverpool have the defensive personnel, but in terms of form at the beginning of this season, not so much.
Yeah, will be interesting to see. See, Man City, they're at home to Porto. Do we need to say much about this game?
Man City need a win. It's as simple as that. They have underperformed in Europe for years. Group stage is never really a problem because they always have easy groups. And yet again, this year, they've been given an absolutely dossy group overall. In that group, the real story for me is Marseille need to play for as much TV money as possible. They have a chance of getting through that. And with the situation in France at the moment, club with a wage bill as high as Marseille, Uber Eats money or not, they are going to need as many millions as possible.
Oh yeah, no, that is Marseille have to finish second. Like for me, they really do. But again, Olympiacos dumped Arsenal, they did dump Arsenal in the Europa League last year, so not an easy game either. But we both expect Man City to beat Porto. I don't think there's a whole lot much we have to say about that game. No. Yeah,
just nothing more. No, nothing on that one.
Nope. Moving on to a game I think you and I would both be interested in, Inter Milan versus Borussia Mönchengladbach. That's an exciting one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Obviously, Inter will be gunning for the Serie A title. They always seem to. Seem to say that's their first aim. But, this is a really difficult group. Yet again, Inter have been resolutely screwed with, thanks Enoch, have never resolutely been screwed with who they've been sided against this year. This is one of the games where they absolutely need to win. Gladbach, honestly, they were in the Europa League group with Roma last year. I wasn't impressed by them at all. They got basically gifted 4 points from hideous refereeing mistakes. I say that as someone who, Gladbach are actually my favourite team in Germany, so don't come at me. But I think Inter need to win this game if we're going to take them seriously as a European force this year. I don't think they've got much of a chance of winning the whole competition, but they really need to fight as hard as possible to get out of this group, especially, again, TV money will help them out an awful lot with their second highest wage bill in Serie A.
Yeah, Enoch, I'll just say we are talking about a German football team at the moment, actually. So you're sort of just on time, I guess. So there you go. I'll spin it for you. You're sort of on time with that. Gladbach, they play Wolfsburg tonight. So that'll be a game I keep an eye out on because Wolfsburg are very, very solid. And so, I'm expecting a really interesting game. Conte versus Marco Rosa, two coaches who have very got defined styles of play. And so should be an interesting one. And I can see the likes of Marcus Thuram and Alassane Plea giving Inter's three-man backline some problems with their pace. So
yeah, and I don't know if this will still affect them going into next week, but there are two Inter Milan centre-backs who are self-isolating, Milan Skriniar and Alessandro Bastoni. So if that's still the case, after the Derby della Madonnina, which is, let's be honest, a very strenuous game, Inter, it's not looking good for them in terms of how they've had their hand dealt for them. If they can get 2 wins out of these games, then Conte is a god, honestly.
I think Ashley Young has tested positive as well, hasn't he? Or I feel like though he was in the news for something of that sort. And I'll have a quick look on that. But also, you talk about Ashraf Hakimi and his electric start for Inter. Well, Gladbach have seen it for the last 2 years, so they can plan for him as well. So it should be. I mean, you can only do so much planning against the guy who's so quick. There's only so much planning you can do. But again, you can sort of game plan for that. And Ginter and Elvedi against Lukaku. I mean, Ginter physically can match Lukaku, so that's why I'm optimistic on that matchup. But I do feel like in this game, I would say a draw would be a good result for Gladbach, but I feel like it's gonna be 2-1 Inter.
I'm going to say 1-0 Inter, the goal coming from Lautaro Martinez. But honestly, if Gladbach could pull off a win, or just referees go in their way like they did in the group stage of the Europa League last year, hardly unsurprising. So, I can't predict this game.
All right. Well, the other sort of noteworthy game, Bayern Munich versus Atletico Madrid. Obviously, when I talked to Jordan Maciel, and again that interview is on YouTube, on our Spotify podcasts. He talked about how Atletico will be it will be a real test for Bayern in this group, and lo and behold, it is a bit of a clash of styles. And I back Bayern to win this, but by no means is this going to be an easy game.
Yeah, these are the two teams that when we were making predictions as to who would win the Champions League last week, these were the two that I actually said. Bayern, because I think they're the best team in the competition. Atletico, because I think this season's truncated circumstances might actually suit their style of play. How typical is it that they've been drawn in the same group? Again, difficult to call. I think at home, Bayern Munich will have the advantage. I would give them the win here. But again, if there's anyone that's going to be able to defend and counter-attack against Hansi Flick's very well-oiled system, I think it's a Simeone Atletico Madrid. Going to say 2-0 Bayern, but far from a dominant performance.
I will say 2-1 Bayern. I can see a pesky Luis Suarez causing mischief with the Bayern's high line. Not that he's the quickest player at his age by now, but certainly has the williness and the intelligence kind of take advantage of it with Diego Costa or whoever they match him up with. And should be an interesting one. I mean, Koke versus the likes of Kimmich, that's a midfield battle I'm very interested to see, as well as Saul and Goretzka, and that should be a very interesting one. In terms of other fixtures, again, I don't think. I mean, I know you're a big fan of Shakhtar Donetsk, and they go to play Real Madrid. Do you think they'll cause them any problems?
No, not away from home. I don't rate Shakhtar's chances of getting out of this group very highly, again, because it's such a difficult group. They're in contention to finish third at the expense of either Gladbach or Inter, so, a good showing would be the best thing for him. But again, I think that Shakhtar's advantage in the Champions League is how well they defend at home. Even though they haven't actually played in their home stadium for a long time, you will be hard-pressed to find a team that sets up that well at the Metalist Arena. I think it's going to be a Real Madrid win, and a fairly convincing one at that. But I want to see how well Shakhtar do, because of course they've lost the manager that brought them so much defensive success in Paulo Fonseca. They've had a few players taken from them over the years, but their backline still looks fairly solid. Yeah, I'm just hoping that Shakhtar. I'm hoping that Shakhtar, even if they lose, they put on a good show, which is more than can be said for the semi-final against Inter last year.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe Junior Moraes may give the likes of Sergio Ramos some problems. We'll see. Other games, RB Salzburg host Lokomotiv Moscow. For more about Salzburg, check out the interview. As I said, Midtjylland against Atalanta. As we said, Olympiacos versus Marseille. So that rounds up all the games. So we do have a bit of time to kind of run through the big European games of this week. And my goodness, there are many. But I feel like, Joe, the big one is the Milan derby. And do we have the team news? Do you know?
Oh, yeah, it's been out for a while. Derby della Madonnina tonight. I won't be watching it, sadly, because I've got to prepare for work and I've got some radio stuff to do. But yeah, the lineups, self-isolation issues aside, the lineups just look fantastic. So for Inter, Samir Handanovic starts in goal with what looks like a back four, unusually, of Danilo D'Ambrosio, Stefan de Vrij, Alexander Kolarov, presumably playing out of position at centre-back, and Ashraf Hakimi, the man in form, starting over Matteo Darmian, because, well, you would, wouldn't you? Marcelo Brozovic and the new signing Arturo Vidal in midfield, alongside Ivan Perisic and one of the most exciting young players in the world, Nicola Barella, supporting the two strikers. Do I even need to say their names? Romelu Lukaku and Lautaro Martinez. Looking at the AC Milan starting 11, again, pretty much full strength starting 11 for Milan. Gianluigi Donnarumma in goal, a back four of Davide Calabria, Simon Kjaer, Alessio Romagnoli and Theo Hernandez. Frank-Yannick Kessié and Ismail Benacer in deep midfield, looking very strong, with Hakan Çalhanoğlu in between Rafa Lau and Alexis Salamakers in the progressive midfield positions. Zlatan Ibrahimovic coming out of his crypt yet again to start up front for AC Milan. Oh, this game could go either way. I mean, Inter have been screwed. They haven't got Milan Skriniar on the pitch. They haven't got Alessandro Bastoni there because, of course, he's self-isolating. It's going to be a really difficult showing for Inter against a vastly improved team. AC Milan. Also, I had not seen this lineup. Perisic playing at wing-back as well. I don't know how much I trust that, especially considering he wasn't even playing at Inter last year. I actually think we're going to see an AC Milan victory in this game, Josh.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very glad the screen share works very well. Second of all, this is a Google manufactured lineup, so of course this may be up for change, obviously. But looking at it, I mean, it's going to be very interesting. It's very interesting to see, as you said, Perisic is a wing back. I'm very interested to see how much defensive work that he gets done. Obviously, Kolarov, he knows that wing-back position very well, so positional-wise, that should be okay. And, I look at the bench of both teams, and I think, there we go, got it down there. A lot of options as well. I mean, you look at, obviously, Christian Eriksen's place in Inter has been questioned for a while, but obviously bring him on for 20 minutes. He can obviously produce things. Alexis Sanchez as well for Inter. Actually, Inter's bench looks surprisingly more sparse than I'd realised.
Yeah, this is the self-isolation really coming home to bite Inter, especially in that defensive
Yeah.
area. Matteo Darmian, it's just such an odd signing on loan from Parma. He wasn't even. I was so excited when he came to Parma last year. He really wasn't that good. So many like defensive players just not available for this team. Kolarov at centre back. I mean, Danilo D'Ambrosio at centre back is very impressive. He is incidentally one of the Italians that I would take over Harry Maguire. But Alexander Kolarov does not play well at centre back. They signed him for that left back position, screwed over with these self-isolation problems. Kolarov is going to have a hell of a game tonight against this AC Milan team rather. And again, one of the little stories from this game, a player that you and I rate very highly, Josh, Sandro Tonali. We all thought he was going to join Inter. He ended up joining his boyhood club AC. Is there going to be a bit of bad blood there? But yeah, you're absolutely right. In terms of the benches tonight, AC Milan look a hell of a lot stronger than what you would have said about them 12 months ago.
I mean, you look at. Tonali's on the bench. Castillejo's on the bench. Brahim Diaz is on the bench. Even
Krunic as well.
Yeah, who scored? I think he scored an international duty as well. So this is. This has been. This is something I guess that Milan have been building towards, and looks like they're finally able to realize, because for so long, and you could say arguably for both teams, they've been obviously on the downward trajectory for a while and starting to rise up again. But man, you definitely look at the benches wise. You definitely trust AC, and then I think Inter have a very strong team. The Brozovic Vidal duo is going to be interesting, because Brozovic obviously more disciplined than Vidal is, and I feel like the three of them in the middle will interchange, and I'm very fast. This is a very fascinating game, and Theo Hernandez, arguably for me, he's in the conversation for one of the best left backs in the world. Obviously, he's not up there yet, but he's certainly on the rise to being there.
I'd say he was the second best left back in Serie A last year, after Robin Gosens really impressed me again after an awful lot of criticism I'd had in the past. This AC Milan team, I'm not going to say I like them by any means. Please never think I'm a fan of AC Milan. But what I really like about this team, after the ridiculous amount of net spend over the last decade and the stupidly expensive signings, even like spending 9 million to loan in Higuain for 6 months, this Milan team at the moment, you look at the players they brought in, they're not ridiculous fees. Calabria is a homegrown player. Theo Hernandez, they got quite cheap. Simon Kjaer was just an exchange with Atalanta. Romagnoli, they brought in from Roma, but he's now a captain. And the guy who I've been really, really excited about for a long time, they signed from Anderlecht in January, Alexis Salamakas, starting on the right wing, although he can basically play anywhere for AC Milan. 3.5 million he cost. What a player he has looked like so far. AC Milan, they don't even need Ralph Rangnick, who we all thought was going to be their manager and sporting director. This Pioli project, which I said was going to be a disaster, has turned out really well. And you know what? Despite the fact I despise AC Milan with a passion, there's no way of arguing the fact that they've gone about this rebuild right in the last year or so. And for the first time in a long time, I actually think this is long-term success on the horizon for this football club.
Yeah, and I have this up there, and this is because, amazingly, Chelsea have conceded a third goal, and it's now 3-3. Yannick Vestergaard scoring in the 92nd minute.
Ex-club back.
Yes, which, that is Chelsea. This is Chelsea in a nutshell, isn't it? Very good going forward, not so good going back.
People always say like Vestergaard's height, he should be particularly good from set pieces. You and I will know from his time at Gladbach, he was never really incredible from set pieces as well. So it really hammers home just how problematic Chelsea's defence is. I'm not going to say bad, because they've got good players, but just how many errors are in that Chelsea defence, and how Frank Lampard just seems to be getting away with ignoring Chelsea's defensive problems because he's super frank. Again, they looked so much more secure under Maurizio Sarri. People just don't like him because he's old and Italian versus Frank Lampard. So, yeah, Chelsea threw this game away. What else can be said?
Yeah, there's no. Jorginho and Kante aside, Kovacic is not even on the squad, which is, for me, that's telling. It's because he adds that midfield solidity. So, I don't know. We'll be able to we'll be able to dissect Chelsea next week for sure. After with this game to analyze, obviously Sevilla want to analyze as well, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to go through Chelsea. But overall, I mean, I'll just ask you about. I mean, Serie A, 4 games. Most teams have played 3 games. Obviously, there's Atalanta and Napoli are now on get 4 games played. Top of the table. I mean, AC Milan, 7 goals, none conceded. Are they the team to beat at the moment?
Oh, I wouldn't say they're favourites. I think it's just a case of some fortuitous fixtures at the start of the season. Impressive though they have looked. I mean, like one of their games, even though they're like one of my favourite teams, that one of their games was against newly promoted Spezia, who never really stood a chance. Saying that they have actually won a game in Serie A, so Forza Spezia. I look at the top 4 at the moment. Like it's what I was saying about the Premier League. It is way too early to be able to say concrete who the favourites are. Sassuolo are not going to finish 4th. Benevento are not going to finish 8th. It's going to level out. I'm hoping that Roma don't finish 10th. I still keep forgetting we're that low in the table at the moment. But yes, some good fixtures this weekend for sure. Torino-Cagliari could be quite fun. Udinese Parma as well. I want to see Parma get away from that relegation zone. Roma have Benevento tomorrow night as well, which is on paper very, very unbalanced, but I'm interested to see how Iago Falque does on his return to Rome, because he's a player that, even though I like the guy, I'm not going to lie, Josh, I completely forgot he played for us for a year.
Yeah. Look, if Sassuolo finish in the top 4, that is quite the season for them. I'd be very excited for De Zerbi and his players. But like you said, very early on in the season, and we shall see what happens. I mean, I look at the Bundesliga table. Stuttgart are 3rd. Is that going to stay? I don't think so. Bayern Munich going to remain 7th? Probably not. So likewise, there are a lot of outliers. I mean, Augsburg are 5th. Leverkusen are 9th, Gladbach are 13th. There's outliers everywhere. I mean, the one I'm very sadly confident in at the moment is that Schalke are probably going to finish at the bottom or close to the bottom, which, yikes. There's not a lot of positives to say. I mean, they've let in 15 goals in 3 games. Obviously, they let in, was it 9 or 8 to Bayern? So I guess you take that aside, but still... But other than that, yeah, like you said, very early on. But it's been an intriguing start to the Bundesliga as well, I can definitely say. And then in terms of La Liga, I'll have a quick look. I mean, how optimistic do we think a top 4 of Real Madrid, Granada, Real Betis, and Sociedad are going to be?
Real Betis in the top 4. Raw's former station manager Luke Edwards will probably be grinning from ear to ear on his journalistic training course at Betis being in the top 4. Don't want to make you upset, Luke. You're not going to be there come the end of the season. But Real Madrid to win the league, I'm confident that they're going to do it. They haven't got any significant competition this year. But I'd be interested to see how high Granada finish, because a lot of the players that did so well for them last year, they've held on to them. So they are a legitimately very good team, Granada.
Yeah, and Barcelona's 7th, but obviously have a few games in hand. Obviously started their campaign later on because of their Champions League exploits. So, or rather, I mean, they went to Lisbon for 1 game, to be fair. So it wasn't much of a exertion on their squad. So yeah, and then I'm looking at France. Lyon are 14th, which is bit of an outlier, obviously. PSG 1st, Stade Rennes 2nd, Lille 3rd. So those teams you definitely expect to see, but you'd expect Lyon to kind of pick it up. And Racing Lens are 4th, which is a very interesting one. But Marseille 10th, so underlying the Marseille thing, Marseille 10th, that is not gonna do it for them. But yeah, I mean, obviously across the European leagues, what's the biggest story for you so far then of this football season when you kind of have a look around?
The slow, inexorable death of defensive football, but especially in the Premier League. The Chelsea versus Southampton game, we haven't watched it, so maybe they are just incredible virtuoso goals. I suspect, though, that they've probably got a lot more to do with dreadful defending. It's a shame to see mid-table sides in the Bundesliga and Serie A and La Liga seem to not be defending as well as they were last year. Maybe COVID's got something to do with that, I don't know. But I'm just fed up with this obsession with attacking football, Josh. I don't care if, like, I'm sorry, if I don't care about 4-2 games and like 7-2 games when every single one of the goals is coming from a rubbish defensive mistake and they're scored from about 5 yards out. It's not exciting. I will take a comeback 2-1 or a well defending nil over those games for a week. So yeah, start defending.
And like the contrarian, I'll play to you. I'm enjoying this attacking football kind of outburst, but however, some of the defensive mistakes have been elementary, and that is, I admit, very infuriating. But I am enjoying this attacking football. I think for me, in terms of when I look across the leagues, obviously, I look at that Serie A table, very excited. I mean, granted, as you said, those teams are not going to be in that same order, but it already appears to be 8 teams that are pushing each other at the top, which is very exciting. Obviously, Bayern Munich have been struggling a bit in Germany, and so there's some teams there that could seize their opportunity. And then, yeah, I feel like the Premier League is probably one of the most watchable leagues at the moment, just because of the sheer drama, and obviously with the new offside rule and teams getting used to it and fans getting used to it, it is creating a whole lot of talking points every weekend.
We're very lucky that the Premier League have started putting highlights on YouTube, because these highlights are basically just goal compilations now.
Yep. Or
watch the Villa Liverpool highlights. There is no football.
It's that, or replays of how penalty. It's like a how do you it's like a penalty award compilation. It's like, how do we award these penalties? Like it's like explaining to an alien, how do you give a penalty away?
Yeah. And then the alien understands less about penalties after the highlights than before them,
and then creates a superior technological artificial referee that gets rid of human error completely.
And his name is Luke Edwards.
Well, on that note, I think we've rambled on for 2 hours or so, plenty. But we'll be back next week with more. Obviously, it was a bit hard this week because we only have international football to review. Next week, we should have some concrete evidence of this weekend's action to analyze and then, put into our predictions, because it's, as I said, it's very hard to predict after an international break. It truly is. But my thanks to Joe Spagnoli, as always, for coming on. We will be back next week. As I said throughout the show, just keep an eye on our socials for the schedule. It's not normal. It's not a normal schedule by any means, and so I would just keep an eye on that. And we will definitely be back for next week's Quaran-Stream. So we'd love for you to join us then. So with that, have a good weekend, and we'll see you then.